Okay, so now day 5, at this point, all of the different information you're gathering may start to be overwhelming and difficult to connect. There's so many brainstorms and so many goals, and you're trying to learn how to organize, and you're finding different organizational strategies that are good at different things at different times for different people. It's a lot. It's a lot. And so recognize that it's going to take a really long time for you as an adult to retrain your perspective, but that you're doing it in order to coach students and children so that they don't have to spend a lifetime learning or figuring out what may or may not work based on what people are telling them they must do, and instead coaching those students and children on identifying their own strengths in being able to brainstorm, set goals, organize their learning. And what I'd like to do now is I'd like to look at strategies, because strategies for reflecting on how you're learning becomes paramount to the learning process. If you find yourself remembering more from audio resources, or you find ways to have visual texts read aloud to you, if you find yourself thinking out loud and needing to walk around in order to think clearly, or create the space, basically, that allows you to learn in the way that you are finding yourself benefiting. It takes time to explore and experiment, and you may see your academic learning slow down as you explore this aspect of your own learning process, and that's okay. Because what's important here is, as you start to look at how you're learning, whether you're seeking visual representations of things, when people try to tell you directions and you can't hold on to it. I mean, you can practice and practice and practice in order to get good at it, but you know that if they just show you, that you're going to pick it up a lot faster. Well, there are people in the world, that there are humans, where if you show them what to do and then you take it away, they're not going to, without any opportunity to hear what the directions are and make sense of it in their own mind, by listening to the directions, or listening to the conversation, or in fact having a conversation where they get to hear and see, or hear and see you, or hear and interact with you in a very physical conversation type of way, then depending on what your particular preference for learning is, and you're probably going to start to realize what it is that you prefer, something that's really important is every human learns visually, auditorily, and kinesthetically. There isn't just one way that you learn. It's called a preference. You may prefer one way because it comes a little bit more naturally to you, but you still need to hear the directions. You can't just walk around without hearing things. And you can't just walk around without doing things in order to master it. Seeing it may make sense the first time, and you might have a preference for that. But that doesn't mean you don't learn kinesthetically, and it doesn't mean you don't learn auditorily. You can listen to directions, and you can get good at learning that way. It's just you have a preference for one more than another. So first recognizing that, and then recognizing that perhaps visually you like to see things for yourself. You have an intrapersonal approach to visual learning. Well, there are people that want to look with others at an item and be able to, while looking, have a conversation interpersonally, so that you can share a diagram or a chart, because you're going to be able to put together patterns, you're going to be able to put together certain things where you're going to want to see within an interpersonal setting, more socially, and that's going to be your preference. So this isn't something where you're going to be able to say, you are this kind of learner, so this is how you're always going to learn. That's not true. Learning strategies, learning preferences, they're just a means for you to reflect on whether or not, if you're, let's say, a third grader learning around, maybe seeing a mountain and learning that between 20 and 30, the middle is 35, and climbing that mountain, once you get to 35, you're at the top of the mountain, and if you trip, you're going to want to fall forward. 25. You're going to want to fall forward and round up to 30. Now, visually, that might make sense to you. Or you might need a poem or something that makes sense sort of musically. If you're able to hear a poem read to you and that allows you to logically put together, like if you're going to round 25 to the nearest tens place, find your place, look next door. Is it 5 or greater? Add 1 more. You know, that kind of poem might actually work well for you, but not everybody. So recognizing which strategy works for you in order to learn a particular skill, maybe you do need to work with something. Maybe you do need to actually work with manipulatives. Maybe you need to take 25 and start to count and start to manipulate and see how one number could be, like 26 could be more closer to 30 than 20. Maybe manipulating it, working with it. Maybe you are more spatial or seeing it and moving things around is something you're going to need to do to learn a particular skill. Maybe hearing it and working with it is going to be something you need to do. So again, being able to reflect on how you're learning. If things are getting stuck, if the resources you're going to are primarily visual, now's the time to start reflecting on whether or not you are learning with a strategy that works best for you for that skill. So all of this is intended for you to be mindful of how you learn so that what you decide to focus on can be overcome. You can maintain that self-confidence and that self-discipline to know that it's not that you can't learn something. It's that how you're learning may need to adjust based on the skill and your preference. Some things need to be learned kinesthetically, and if it's a kinesthetic skill and that's not a strength, recognize that it's going to take a little more work. But that skill may be necessary for you understanding a later skill. So recognizing that and emotionally preparing for how hard that might be for you is going to benefit you in the long run, knowing that skills will connect and become increasingly more complex and more satisfying because of it. So that's something to explore as you continue working on becoming a self-directed learner.